Another year down, another set of movies I've watched. This year certainly felt like it went a lot faster than the others, and while I know I haven't uploaded many videos, it doesn't mean I haven't been working on them. Things have changed quite a bit since last year, so if you've stuck around, I really appreciate it. Out of all of the films I've watched this year, I've picked out the 10 best that I saw. These films did not come out in 2025 or anything, they are just 10 of the best films I watched for the first time in 2025. While talking about the films, I'm going to try and remain as spoiler-free as possible, but be as free as you like in the comments discussing your own opinions on the film if you want, as I always find it interesting hearing others' opinions. Now, this list isn't in any particular order, so the actual placement of the films has nothing to do with which one I prefer more or less. I simply just picked 10 of my most favourite films I watched this year. Starting with North by Northwest. This was actually the first Alfred Hitchcock film I've ever seen. Shocking, I know, but I can confidently say that from this one alone, I've become a fan of his. Maybe not a super fan yet, but the film left quite the impression on me. From the start to the end of the first hour, it felt like a breakneck pace that just kept getting faster and faster, and I mean that in a good way. The film never slowed down, which hooked me immediately and kept my attention throughout that first crazy hour. The fast pace also works well with the plot of the film and what the main character is going through. After the first hour, when they get to the train, the film drastically slows down, which works amazingly because it finally allows some breathing room and lets you catch up with the characters and develops their relationship. It was such an enjoyable watch, especially with that bonkers ending sequence. 1984, based on the famous book and coming out in 1984, was probably one of the most unsettling films I've ever seen. Top credit to the production designers, because this film is ugly and miserable to watch. But I still enjoyed my time watching it. Not because it was entertaining, but because of its messaging and the story. I especially loved the ending. John Hurt's portrayal of Winston was great, and I only think it was topped by Richard Burton's portrayal of O'Brien. The scores were excellent as well, and I enjoyed both of the scores, although I did find the full orchestra score to be more fitting, so if you're undecided on which one to watch, I would personally go with that one. I think this will be the definitive on-screen version of 1984 for years to come, and I can't see anything topping it anytime soon. I highly recommend it. Another unsettling film is Seven, which I went into completely blind, something which I'm glad I did. I find it crazy that all of this time I have luckily managed to avoid any spoilers, because what a treat this film was. I can see why it had such a lasting impression on people, especially that ending. One of the main things that stuck out to me was the atmosphere of the city. I love a good rain-soaked city, and that one shot where the person is holding the gun, was just amazingly done. Anthony Mann is one of my favourite directors, ever since I watched The Far Country, which has become one of my favourite films. So when I found out about Winchester 73, I knew I had to check it out, and I wasn't disappointed. Initially, I thought it would be more of a typical western from the period, but instead I was pleasantly surprised with the story. I love the fact that the film follows the rifle mainly, having it technically be the main character throughout the entire story, and you get to see its grand adventure being used by all of these different types of people. The Winchester also felt like it had some magical property. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood was a film I missed back in 2019, despite being a fan of Quentin Tarantino's other work like Reservoir Dogs and Django Unchained. It took until now to finally get around to watching it, but I am glad I finally did, because I enjoyed this one immensely, unlike The Hateful Eight, which I felt was unnecessarily long. I love this callback to old Hollywood and older films of the 60s and 70s, and how unapologetic it was at showing how crazy the world was back then, and how these larger-than-life actors are really flawed and kinda awful people. Despite it being a Tarantino film, to me, this felt like the most non-Tarantino film he has done so far. Not to say it doesn't have his style, but it feels a lot less steeped in it, probably because of its lack of violence, until the very end, which honestly, I actually preferred the change. Uncut Gems was another film from 2019 that I decided to skip at the time, because of all the hype around it turned me off, but I can confidently say that the hype was justified. This is one of the most engaging, if not stressful films I have ever seen. When I was watching this, I had to pause it for a minute because of how intense the film was. There is this one dynamic between two characters that I thought was going to go the typical route, but actually went in a completely different direction from what I expected, which subverted my expectations. Also, I know this has been said before, but Adam Sandler gives one of his best performances I've seen from him. He needs to do more films like this. Now, onto the most fun I have had watching a film this year, with Police Story. I went into this one completely blind, and I was not disappointed. From that first crazy action scene, I fell in love immediately. Jackie Chan going so hard chasing that bus down, and then the epic theme song kicks in. It's just pure cinema. It also helped that the rest of the film is great, especially the fight scenes that are top notch with how well choreographed and creative they are. That one shot of Jackie spinning around on the clothing line is just burned into my memory. The entertainment value alone is worth the time investment to watch this film, so if you haven't seen it, go watch it. It's just a shame the sequel isn't as good. Now, I'm not the biggest horror fan, but the original Wicker Man intrigued me so much that I was drawn into watching it. After watching it, it's definitely not the typical horror film I was thinking of, which was great because I feel like I enjoyed it a lot more because of that. It was a very unsettling film, which I love, and it reminded me a lot of H.P. Lovecraft's story, The Shadow over Innsmouth, where an outsider comes into a town that just isn't quite right. The film builds this tension throughout the whole film, which left me unnerved by the situation that Sergeant Howie finds himself in. Christopher Lee's performance as Lord Summerisle was standout, and I always found him to be at home in these more outlandish characters. The folk soundtrack is a nice touch as well. With the Golden Princess library finally freed from Wright's Hell, I was able to finally check out Hard Boiled, which is probably the crown jewel of that library for many, and for good reason. Hard Boiled is probably the best action film I have ever seen, as its action scenes are just incredible. The practical effects combined with the intense Hong Kong stuntmen and John Woo's direction makes for the perfect action scenes that I don't think I'll ever tire of seeing. That ending hospital scene also had some great cinematography with that one long shot in the hallways. If you know, you know. Outside of the crazy action scenes, I found the story to be pretty generic, but it did its job. Last but certainly not least, I have Playtime by Jacques Tati, which was the first of his films that I have seen, and I thought it was a great introduction to his style and humour. I remember seeing a couple clips of it years ago, and remembered thinking, it looks so alien. Having seen it now, I can see why I thought that. The world that Tati portrays in Playtime is very alien and lifeless at the start, to which I assume was a commentary on how soulless and devoid the world was becoming, with its huge steel and glass skyscrapers that I found out later were actually made for the film, which is crazy to think about. But despite all of that, the film doesn't bog itself down in it, pushing past that and being an enjoyable and humorous experience. Throughout, I was thoroughly entertained by how, no pun intended, playful and humorous the film was. I found myself laughing at many of the jokes, and the film just has this amazing pace that never stopped. Everything flowed so well and seamlessly. I will definitely be checking out more of Tati's films, as I love his style of filmmaking and humour. I hope one day the uncut version of Playtime surfaces, because it's truly a shame that this masterpiece didn't get the love or respect it should have when it first came out. That does it for my top 10 list. If you have any of your own opinions or thoughts on my 2025 list and the films contained in it, I would love to hear them in the comments, especially if you agree or disagree with some of my takes. Thank you for watching. There will be more videos to come in the new year.